Did you know that a TV show creator can easily get you hooked on a series for multiple seasons, even if it's dull and silly? All they need is a strong first few episodes. After that, the quality doesn't really matter, because you'll likely force yourself to watch until the end. Why? Because you don't want to waste all that time you've invested in watching several episodes of that silly show. This mental trap is known as the sunk cost fallacy. The sunk cost fallacy is a trick that our minds play on us, making us think that we have to stick with something because we've already put so much into it. To continue investing in something simply because we have already invested time, money, or effort into it. It's the idea that we've come too far to turn back now, even if the current costs outweigh the potential benefits. This can lead us to make irrational decisions that are based on past investments rather than current circumstances. I can confidently say that one of the most significant factors holding us back from making positive changes in our lives is the sunk cost fallacy. This cognitive bias can make us resilient to change and lead us to cling to situations that are no longer serving us. For example, consider the case of continuing to read a book that you're not enjoying. You might feel compelled to continue going because you've already invested time and energy into it, even though it's not bringing you any value. The sunk cost fallacy tells us we should keep going because we've already put in so much effort, but we're just wasting more time and energy. It's important to recognize that the sunk cost fallacy can lead us to make irrational decisions that don't serve our best interests. In the example of the book, the reality is that if you've read 400 pages and haven't found it useful, it's unlikely that the last 100 pages will be any different. Yet, the bias can convince us to keep going. It's crucial to ask ourselves why we're so unwilling to cut our losses and move on. Is it because we're afraid of admitting that we've made a mistake in choosing the book in the first place? Or is it because we're clinging to the hope that the book will eventually get better, even though all evidence suggests otherwise? The sunk cost fallacy is rooted in a few key psychological factors, such as loss aversion and endowment effect. Loss aversion refers to our tendency to weigh losses more heavily than gains, which can cause us to cling to the past investments even when they're no longer beneficial. The endowment effect is the phenomenon where we place a higher value on something simply because we own it, which can make it difficult to let go of things that are no longer serving us. These psychological factors can combine to create a powerful bias that influences our decision-making. The sunk cost fallacy can have devastating consequences for traders and investors who let it guide their decisions. Imagine you've invested in a stock that's been performing poorly, but you keep holding on it because you've already invested so much in it. You might think, I've already lost so much money, what's a little more? But that's exactly the kind of thinking that can lead to even greater losses. By clinging to past investments, you're essentially throwing good money after bad and increasing your risk of further losses. This is where the sunk cost fallacy can be especially dangerous because it can cloud our judgment and prevent us from making rational decisions based on current information. We might ignore warning signs that indicate it's time to cut our losses and move on, all because we're fixated on the time and money we've already invested. But the reality is, holding on to a losing investment is often just delaying the inevitable, and it can end up costing us more in the long run. Unfortunately, the sunk cost fallacy doesn't just affect our financial decisions, it can also wreak havoc on our personal relationships. Imagine you're in a relationship that's not fulfilling, but you stay because you've already invested so much time and energy into it. You might think, I've already put in so much work, I can't give up now. But this kind of thinking can lead to unhappiness and even resentment as you continue to invest in a relationship that's not meeting your needs. The sunk cost fallacy can also lead us to stay in a toxic or even abusive relationship because we've already invested so much in them. But the reality is, staying in a relationship that's harmful to our well-being is never worth the cost. The time and energy we've already invested in a relationship is not a reason to stay if it's not bringing us joy and fulfillment. The sunk cost fallacy can also affect our careers in significant ways. Imagine you're in a job that's no longer fulfilling, but you stay because you've invested years in the company and you don't want to start over. You might think, I've already climbed the corporate ladder. I can't throw it all away now. But staying in a job that's no longer satisfying can lead to burnout. The sunk cost fallacy isn't limited to just the examples I mentioned. Take a moment to think about your own life and see how many times you've fallen prey to this mental error. Do you think you've missed out on great opportunities for change because of this? How much further ahead could you have been in life if you had been aware of the sunk cost fallacy and avoided its trap? Imagine all the time, energy, and money you could have saved if you had immediately discarded books or movies that weren't adding value to your life. Believe me, I can give endless examples of how the sunk cost fallacy shows up in our everyday lives. Some decisions like quitting a TV series or book may not be that challenging, but others, like ending a long-term relationship or changing careers, can be much more complex. When it comes to big life changes like these, it's crucial to approach the decision-making process thoughtfully and critically. It may not always be easy to determine if it's time for a change, and it can be emotionally, psychologically, and financially challenging to make a switch. That's why it's essential to take the time to examine the situation thoroughly and consider all the implications before making a decision as much as possible. So what can you do to avoid falling prey to the sunk cost fallacy in practice? I suggest starting with small steps. Focus on the simple things first, such as discarding a book or movie that's no longer bringing you joy. Practice letting go of small things without feeling guilty or blaming yourself. By doing this, you'll strengthen your critical thinking skills and increase your confidence in making decisions. When it comes to more complex decisions, such as changing careers or ending long-term relationships, take your time and approach the decision-making process with caution and consideration. Give yourself several months to reflect. Research and evaluate all aspects of the decision. This will help ensure that you're making a well-informed choice that aligns with your values and goals. Avoiding the sunk cost fallacy is not about suppressing or ignoring your need for change, but rather facing it head-on and making thoughtful decisions based on your current circumstances.